Here's a completely ridiculous story coming out of the US that at first I didn't really believe. It's been uncovered that there was a secret project in the 1950s for the US as a display of strength in the Cold War to blow up the moon. I'm not kidding. It's been uncovered that there was a plot that, if necessary, to demonstrate power to the Soviets, to nuke the moon. I mean, this is a cartoonish level of supervillainy. I mean, this is like literally something out of a comic book. That's something out of a cartoon. I'm going to blow up the moon. What? Alright. The secret project was called A Study of Lunar Research Flights, Project A119, that was carried out and initially intended to intimidate the Soviet Union after they had successfully launched Sputnik 1. After the Soviets had gotten the first satellite into space, for some reason the response by the United States was nuke the moon. It's just so like ridiculous that it's like actually really hard to believe that it's true. You know, it was the sight of a magnificent nuclear flash from the Earth, like seeing the moon explode, was apparently supposed to terrify the Soviet Union and boost U.S. confidence, according to Leonard Riefel, 85, who spoke to the Associated Press about it. Now, what's interesting about this is astronomer Carl Sagan was responsible for some of the calculations that could cause the nuclear detonation. Carl Sagan, seriously. Carl Sagan is like one of the coolest guys of science. And he's doing like stupid things like this. Like, no, Carl Sagan, dude, like, you're awesome. You're up there with like Einstein, Hawking, and Tyson. Like, it's hard to think that somebody as cool as Carl Sagan is doing something like this. And then on the other side, it's also the same thing about Einstein and the nuclear bomb. But in the end, the program was actually abandoned because of safety concerns for the radioactive material that would contaminate space, and worried about the bomb detonating prematurely and endangering the people on Earth. Oh, well, thank God that kind of reason actually managed to win out. But I mean, how typical is this? It just, I mean, really think about this. The Soviets achieve a great scientific feat of getting the first satellite into space, and the knee-jerk response to the United States is violence. Violence against the moon. I can't believe this. Oh, you accomplished a great scientific feat? Yeah, well, we'll blow up the moon. Like, oh my God. And the Soviets are the ones who are supposed to be the evil villains of the world. The Soviets never threatened to blow up the moon. The Soviets never planned to blow up the moon. The Soviets had all kinds of ideas that they were researching at the time, like in the 1980s. One of the ideas was to put some kind of device up in space that would reflect light back down to Earth on Siberian areas during the winter months, to provide light for research stations and stuff like that, you know, when it would be dark all the time. I mean, they had ideas like that. They were investing in solar energy in the 80s. Like, oh my God. As the Soviet Union was launching the first satellite into space, a huge technological and scientific achievement, capitalism felt like blowing up the moon. Like, oh, like, think about that. That's mind-boggling. Like, oh my God. Like, the 1950s were really stupid. I mean, there's a lot of reasons the 1950s was stupid, but I mean, this really takes the cake. Now, I decided to take a few minutes and research what would potentially happen if you had destroyed the moon. The first thing is the moon absorbs a lot of the asteroids that hits the Earth. I don't know how many, or even if it's a lot, but more than would hit the Earth, definitely. If you blew up the moon, a lot of fragments would strike the Earth, and that would be bad. I mean, if we didn't have a moon, there'd be no lunar tide. I mean, there'd still be a tide from the gravitational pull of the sun. Uh, but I'm really tempted to quote O'Reilly, you can't explain that. But they would be 1/3 as great as the tides that we have now, which would vastly affect the weather. I mean, oceanic currents, especially things like tides, are affected by the moon, and that would end up completely screwing with the weather as we knew it. This would also cause the day to only be about 6 hours long instead of 24 because the moon's gravity, I actually didn't know this, was actually slowing the Earth's rotation. And the moon holds the Earth's axis steady at 23.5 degrees. Well, the Earth's axis was free to move about unimpeded, and the equator would eventually shift to where the poles are, and then back over again over millions of years, which means the equator would actually end up in the North Pole, and vice versa, over millions of years. But it would happen. Apparently, it's the moon that's keeping the planet from doing that. Now, I did look a little bit more into scientific studies, and they showed that this would cause the planet to rotate faster because the day would be shorter as a result. Because the day would be shorter as a result of the planet spinning more quickly, which is stopped by the gravity of the moon. The faster a planet rotates, the faster winds blow. The study said, look at Jupiter. The largest planet in the solar system rotates once every 10 hours, and that's a massively huge planet. So it to rotate in 10 hours is actually really fast. The winds are pulled in an east-west flowing pattern, and the wind speeds reach between 100 and 200 miles per hour. So we'd almost be could potentially be stuck in a permanent hurricane mode. All because the leaders of a capitalist nation were pissed off that the Soviets actually got a satellite into space first. I mean, it's amazing to think of what could actually happen. But the Earth would be rotating once every 8 hours, so 100-mile-per-hour winds would probably not be reasonable to expect. But potentially, that's what could happen. I mean, we'd have globally huge wind changes would also, again, in turn affect the tides as well. It would affect animals to an insane degree because the day becoming so much shorter, that would screw up daytime and nocturnal animals. The whole animal population of the entire planet would become confused basically in the course of a couple of days. I mean, the whole world would be thrown into complete chaos. And hurricanes, as it says here, hurricanes would even have a higher wind speed. Imagine a Hurricane Katrina at 1.5 times. At just 1.5 times. I mean, this shows the absolute insanity of capitalism. They would really rather, seemingly they'd rather screw the entire world out of petty anger towards the Soviets achieving something first. I mean, I've already said it several times, it's mind-boggling that this happens, but I mean, this is another indication of how dangerous the 1950s actually was. A plot to blow up the moon.